Hi, welcome to All the Sense in the World. I'm Joy Berta. Today with me, I have Joseph Illidge. He is a writer, a mentor, and an editor in the comic industry. And I am so thrilled to see him again. It's been a while. Good to see you, Joseph.
Good to see you, Joy. This is great. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Joseph, you have, as I recall, back in the day, you and I had done a movie together. When I say done a movie, I mean I playing the actor and you were the director.
That's right. I was the director and the screenwriter of a short film, which was part of an anthology that my two partners and I put together. So my film was centered on a male prostitute. And as I thought about the background of the characters more, I realized that it would be interesting if this person answered to someone, if this person had a pimp. And so you were cast as this person's boss, as the boss of prostitutes, and him being one of them. And it was a pretty amazing scene. We shot that in Inwood, in Uptown Manhattan. It was pretty cool, under a bridge.
I do remember that bridge.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
it's like, where are the dead bodies?
Exactly. See, very dramatic, good for framing a scene, right? Because we shot all these other scenes in the film as interiors because they were in people's homes, in people's beds, because he was a prostitute. That was the only exterior scene of the entire film.
Well, I'm grateful I wasn't in the bed. Thank you.
No, we had to twist it around and say, okay, how can we, subvert the expectations of people who automatically have been trained to believe a pimp is going to be a man and likely a black man, right? So going in the reverse and having a woman bring that diversity to it, that was something that really extended from my background in comics and always wanting to challenge gender norms and challenge ethnicity norms in our society. So doing that, it really worked well. It was the final piece of the puzzle. And I remember that shoot pretty fondly.
I enjoyed it. And you were a phenomenal director. I mean, as I recall, I remembered, yeah, I don't remember the casting specifically, but I remember, being given the script and I was like, yeah, I can do this. And I'm trying to put on my, my most hard face, tough guy, tough girl.
That's right. And
but it was great. And I'm telling you, the experience was, it changed me in a way because I I'd never needed to pull that kind of a power that, before as an actor. It was typically, yeah, very feminine parts or or parts that wouldn't have stretched me in that way. It was wonderful. And I'm going to tell you, I'm so grateful that I moved to New York City because I came from Utah and I was typecasted a lot, just
wow.
I played Anita in West Side Story, which was great. She was phenomenal, but they were looking for a brown person.
Right.
Who could sing and dance. That's me.
Right. Wow.
And then they cast me as a jungle girl in the next show because I was the brownest, darkest person. No. It's interesting you say this because in the reviews, in the newspaper, they're like, they really undermined her abilities, that, putting her in this role. They're, they're like, she's talented.
That's right.
Why would you cast her as the mute jungle girl?
So,
anyway, New York and having these opportunities, it's and again, this was back in the 90s, and then here we are, and I don't know, we're in 2000, maybe 3, 4, 5. I don't know when you did this, but
Oh my goodness, right, the exact year. I believe we did it in 2002.
oh,
I'm almost
2000.
positive that was the year we shot the film, which means that next year will be the 20th anniversary of our relationship.
Yes.
Pretty
So
awesome.
no, it's been amazing. So I've been able to see Joseph and his amazing career, and I knew you were talented, but it's been really wonderful seeing the impact you're having on people. You're so willing to, again, you're a mentor to help people kind of get out of their comfort zone. But also you're transforming people's mindsets. And so tell us a little bit about, first, I want to know how you got into this creative industry, whether it be comics or being a director of films. It started somewhere, and also this courage that you've had to change the norm, to change. That's two big questions.
That's fine. That's fine.
You
I
can handle it.
appreciate them. I appreciate them. So I will do my best. So my interest in the arts and telling stories really goes back to my childhood. My mother bought me comic books every Friday as part of a regular weekly tradition because she recognized my aptitude for reading. And so she nurtured that. She would later tell me that as a third grader, I would read out of the New York Times. And I'm sure I didn't necessarily know what all the words meant, but my pronunciation and my capacity to read was such that that was something that she wanted to encourage. And so she bought me comic books and she fed my love of these larger than life superhero stories, which really communicated ideas of teamwork. And I grew up on DC Comics in the beginning, but then eventually I switched over to Marvel Comics, where the characters were a bit more complex, closer to real life. And even during that time, there was still the disparity of representation of people of color, of people who were queer, of people who were wheelchair users. And that diversity was marginal in comics when I was growing up. And during my time in college, I originally thought I was going to be an artist. But after I graduated from college, a friend of mine had a really sobering conversation with me that made me realize that my future was not as a visual artist, but I saw the possibility of being a storyteller with words based on the encouragement of friends during my college years and based on my love of reading. And when I graduated from college, or even during the later college years, there were two books that I read that really had an amazing impact on me going forward. One was the autobiography of Malcolm X, as told by Alex Haley, which was not only the portrait of, as far as I'm concerned, one of the most amazing human beings that ever walked the earth, but a study in the human capacity for transformation. Malcolm X was a man who went through three profound stages of transformation in a human lifetime that was snuffed too early. And anytime that I feel like I do not have the capacity to pivot, or it's too late for me to make a change in my life, I look at Malcolm X and I know that it's not. I know what we are capable of as human beings. And the second book I read was a science fiction novel called Nova by an author named Samuel Delany. And Samuel Delany is a seminal author in science fiction. He's a professor. He is one of the true fathers of Afrofuturism. And the novel that I read, Nova, he wrote when he was 19 years old.
Oh, wow.
And so those two books, in addition to when you're talking about the early 90s, I was really inspired by the music of Public Enemy, the music of A Tribe Called Quest would come along. And so this kind of cultural empowerment and intelligence and urgency, these things came together to begin really breaking my perceptions of reality in my early 20s. And so in 1993, after I had become unemployed, I found out about a company called Milestone Media Inc. They were the first Black-owned comic book company to have a publishing deal with a comic book industry giant, which was DC Comics. So this was unprecedented in comic books. And they had a free internship. And that was something that I was not at all interested in, because the idea of working for free was something that my 23-year-old brain could not process.
You're worth more than that, Joseph, right?
I would think so. And thank you. I appreciate your support. And yes, I did feel that. I felt that what I had to offer had a dollar value. However, when I became unemployed, I was honestly lost. I did not have a direction. I did not know what my next step was. I was trying to find jobs and nothing was coming through. And I was at this happens. And it happens a number of times, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. But, at that time, I'm a young Black man out of college, and my friends and I were trying to figure out our way in life. So the absence of direction was definitely startling for me. And I went to a newsstand and I saw this comic book, and the comic book was called Icon. And it had two Black superheroes, adult Black man and a teenage Black girl, side by side, surrounded by SWAT cops, and they were ready to go at it. And I never saw a comic book cover like that. I grew up on Captain America, Spider-Man, Superman, Wonder Woman, and all of that. And even when you had the Black character here and there, quite frankly, they were usually getting their butt kicked on the cover. I never saw that kind of empowerment and the truth of the Black Americans' conflict with the police industrial complex shown so honestly on a comic book cover.
Visually, wow.
Right. And that was the company Milestone. And that's when I realized that I desperately wanted to be a part of that, because I knew that whatever Milestone was, whoever Milestone was, they were going to change the world in some way, shape, or form. And I wanted to be part of it. And so I got over my hurdle of pride regarding not being willing to do a free internship. I went to the interview, and they did bring me into their program. Years later, I would find out that I totally ruined the interview. I walked in there with a chip on my shoulder and 21 years of knowledge of comic books. So obviously I'm an expert, even though I'm walking to this big company. And my friend, Jason Scott Jones, who was a member of the internship program, stuck up for me and endorsed me, and they gave me a shot. And so I worked there as an intern from May to July of 1993. And I did things that were both fun and menial. I thought I was going to get fired on my third day because I accidentally stuck somebody with an X-Acto knife, and that moment froze in time. And I was like, holy crap, I am going to get fired from a job that pays nothing. This is absolutely classic.
I'll add that to my, I'll add that to your autobiography.
Right? Yeah, that goes on my curriculum vitae, right? And and the guy had mercy on me. I'm a kid. I didn't mean it, of course. So he let me go. And so I worked there for 3 months, learned about business behind the ideas, that there's this whole infrastructure and society and this camaraderie that was happening. And these comic books were coming every month. And I kept seeing more characters of color, and there were characters that looked like me, and they validated my place in this world. And so at the end of the 3 months, I walked into the president's office one morning, Derek Dingle, and I expressed my gratitude to everyone for what they taught me and what I learned in being part of the group, but I had to go back out in the world and find a paying job. And so I went to lunch and I came back that day, and he called me into his office and he offered me a part-time job as his assistant to the
Wow,
president.
that's
And
amazing.
so it was the moment that changed the direction of my entire life. It gave me purpose, and it was the first time that I ever worked in a corporate setting. And so Milestone was really the beginning of my career and my personal mission to promote, uplift, and empower people from diverse backgrounds. That's where I understood that it was an imperative.
Wow. So you did cover a little bit of the second question I had asked too, but no, there are a few thoughts, that the idea of humble confidence.
Well, yeah, that's
Is
interesting.
it
So,
possible?
I will say that, I grew up as a very angry individual. And as I've gotten older, I have learned that anger is not a weapon, it is actually a parasite. And that, the best things that we can experience in life are gratitude and the opportunity to help other people, right? And
Oh,
so,
service. Yeah.
yeah, when I realized that I was a servant, then that's when I would say my humility started to become activated. You know, when I got to Milestone, I'd been reading comics all my life, so that was my world. So I'm in the comic book industry. My initial position was, you can't tell me anything. Like, this is my world. Like, I've been practicing to be here like a boxer ever since I was this in the second grade. So I came into the comic book industry cocky,
Yeah.
and it was mentors that helped me understand that the primary job was not to get what I wanted, but to help other people be better at their job, whether they're a writer, whether they're an artist, to be someone that they can talk to. And that was where the little, kind of germs of it began. But I would say it took me a while to get to a less angry place. And true humility is an understanding that you are not the priority in any equation.
That's beautiful. How did you work through this anger?
Some of it was therapy. Some of it was meeting the right person, who is my wife, my life partner. I did a little time as part of a Sangha group, Buddhism. And quite frankly, the last year and a half, this world during the pandemic, I had to deal with personal demons, and getting to the other side of that, I learned to truly wake up every morning with a sense of gratitude. And that is the fuel that allows me to get up and be determined to do something every day. Right. So
Beautiful.
all of that really came together to get me to this place. And my journey is still continuing.
You have a lot to do, but it's hard to do it when you are walking around with the chip on your shoulder or that anger within. And I will say, I don't think a lot of people even recognize what it is per se. It's like people who will blow really fast, or kind of taking being very offensive, taking things really personally, immediately, turning something into something it never was meant to be.
That's
Those.
right. And still working on it. Let's
Oh,
be clear. I am by no means a sensei in this. Like I said, my journey is still continuing, but I'm closer to the destination than I was years back.
I love it, but it sounds like you've done some work, and you're freeing yourself up. I call them demons too. You know, you're every now and I know they sometimes pop back in and they want to visit, you
They
know,
do. They
but
dance
finding
around in
your
your
way
head.
to, yeah, finding those things that protect you. And I do believe people you surround yourself with, the,
Absolutely.
you know, the goals we have in this life, the purpose we actually allow in, and as you had mentioned,
Yes.
service and helping others, and gratitude. Wow, that's huge.
Absolutely. That was something that I learned from a mentor of mine, Stephen Barnes. He really embedded the idea of gratitude into my psyche. And so it was something that I was able to fall back on when I was getting consumed again by those demons.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep.
Mental note right there. Well, you had mentioned something else that's really interesting, because so if I look at a comic book, and I don't spend much time reading comics. My son loves comics.
Okay.
But
I applaud your son. I have sympathy for you, but we can change that. There's still time. There are
that's
some
why we're
comic books out there for you,
that's
Joe.
why we're here. That's why we're here. I
Good.
love Wonder Woman.
That's
Okay.
what you should. We can have a whole conversation about Wonder Woman and Linda Carter
Oh,
being Latina. Yes.
I know. I
That
know.
that's a
That was
whole
my
other
inspiration. I know that was one of my inspiring moments in life. Kind of like, she's Mexican too, and she's made
yes.
something of herself. You know, awesome.
Yes.
It's awesome. I know that's another topic. Maybe later.
Yes.
No, but I wanted to mention this idea you shared, going into, you know, or looking at a comic book. I don't think we realize until you're like, you were in the, you know, in a comic, in a, you know, with a company, a corporation that is putting together comic books, creating them. And I don't think we look at one and say, oh, look at all of these details and all of the people who probably it takes to create this. It's
Yes.
not just a singular person with an idea, but I love, you had mentioned teamwork. You had mentioned this idea of sharing ideas, but also, you know, I mean, healthy competition, that's another topic.
Right.
But yeah,
Right.
being in this kind of an industry, it takes a team.
It does. It does. And that was what I learned from Dwayne McDuffie, who was the editor-in-chief of Milestone, who since passed away. He taught me what an editor was. I didn't know. I grew up on comic books, and that was a name that I ignored. I was very interested in who the writer was, who the artists were.
Yeah,
Editor, I don't know who that is. And Dwayne showed me what an editor was. And the editor is the person who works with all the different creators to deliver the work on time in the goal of telling the story. So the story is the focus. Comic books come out once a month. And so there has to be a sense of timeliness. There has to be a sense of quality. When you're dealing with corporate owned characters, they're intellectual properties. So as an editor, you are a shepherd of an intellectual property and all the rules that go with that.
wow.
Right? Which is a serious responsibility. You're a caretaker, and you're an ally to the creators.
Yes.
So you are trying to help the writer be the best writer she can be, the artist be the best artist he can be. And part of that really involves having an education in storytelling. Now, I was fortunate because I went to arts high school, the High School of Art and Design in Manhattan. I went to the School of Visual Arts for college. And although I did not become a visual artist, that understanding of visual art, that education helped me to be a good editor because I'm able to speak to artists in their language. And insofar as writing, I'm a constant reader. I'm a reader and I'm a writer. And so, and again, I have mentors. So story is this it's this nut that you never totally crack. No one ever has it down 100%. You're constantly learning and your knowledge is constantly evolving. So that's what I impart to the creators that I'm working with. It's always about telling the best story. It's not about ego. If your ego is coming before the story, then that's a problem. Your ego fuels you to propel you to tell the best stories because the work is a reflection of you, but the ego does not precede the story, right? We're all servants to the story. So, when you talk about how most people don't understand how corporations are making comic books, when I was an editor in the Batman editorial group for DC Comics, I almost got fired. In my opinion, I almost got fired the second week because there was this Catwoman storyline. The Joker was a guest star. The colorist sent in some pages and the Joker's lips were blue. Now, I've known the Joker as a fan since the second grade and his lips were red. But I figured, listen, I just got here. This is the Catwoman colorist. That person knows what they're doing. So I'm just going to put these through. And they went to the production house. We got back proofs. And the senior art director lost his mind and sent an email asking who was responsible for this. Now we're going to have to spend extra money for another round of proofs, so on and so forth. And Jordan Gorfinkel, who was my immediate supervisor, took a bullet for me and in the email said it was him.
Ooh. Oh, wow. He
Right.
He knew you'd be a dead man.
Right.
Wow.
But that also said something about character, right? Like leaders take bullets for their people, right? And I had just been there 2 weeks and this guy took one for me. That said something to me about character, right? So that was when I learned that Batman and his world is an intellectual property, and intellectual properties have rules, and those rules cannot be messed with.
You're talking
right?
Even the color of the lips.
That's part of the visual trademark of the Joker.
Yeah.
Green hair, purple suit, white skin, red lips. That's iconography, right? No matter what interpretation of the character you see, it will usually and should come down to those four colors, right? So that's where the corporate reality comes in.
Okay.
Where the creative comes in is people who love to tell stories. And so when you look at like the Marvel Cinematic Universe and now the Marvel streaming universe, one of the reasons why those stories are so resonant is because they were based on decades and decades of stories in which people worked hard to tell compelling stories about characters with themes that related to us.
So is it a kind of they're taking it's a compilation of stories that were already told? Is that what you're saying?
They're looking at the core characters and they're looking at certain storylines, and then they're innovating those storylines for a different medium and for a more modern audience.
Yeah. Well, that sounds almost like an interpretation or reading the hieroglyphics.
Exactly right. That is exactly right. When you're talking about the comic books, you are talking about the source code or how those characters are reinterpreted in all these different mediums, whether it's television, whether it's your computer, the big screen, video games, the live stage. The comic books are the source code.
That's impressive because you have to be very honest with your source code, right? Or you can't switch up the HTML.
You do at your peril, but if you respect what the core of the idea is, then you can mess with it, but the essence will remain intact, right? Like there's a certain nucleus of rules for any character.
So as the editor, you have to babysit. You do. I mean, you're the one that's like, go and play, children, but I have to make sure you don't get hurt.
Well, very much, and I would say more of a partnership. We'll call it a bit more collaborative, but yes, I have to be responsible to make sure no one veers off the track because creatively you could be inspired
Yeah.
to do that, but there are reasons beyond me, beyond the creators, why we have to keep certain things intact. Interesting, you mentioned, you said children. When you talk about a parental dynamic, where that comes in for me is, interestingly enough, it's the characters. For the time that I'm taking care of characters, I see them as my babies,
Okay.
or I'll refer to them as, like, if I'm around when this character is created and brought into the mythology, that's my niece, I'm one of their uncles. So I develop affection for these characters so that I can care about them while I'm taking care of them.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's great. There was something I was going to ask you about, back to the teamwork. So as you're talking about stories, and that sounds like that is one of the cores to comics, right? The story, or maybe it is the core.
That's right. That's right.
So how could you tell us, just kind of sit us down as though we were going to create a story together? I'm curious, what is that process? And I'm sure it can take a very long time, but sometimes maybe I imagine kind of like, like Saturday Night Live, they're creating the skit and they have people all sitting at a table, and I'm kind of picturing that,
Yes.
the writers shooting ideas. It's like, oh yeah, that's amazing, that's hilarious, and
Okay.
but tell me.
Okay. I'm gonna try and boil it down about 5 minutes, right? But give you a wide process. So I worked for a company called Lion Forge. Lion Forge was another Black-owned comic book company, and they asked me to come on board to be a senior editor and to spearhead their superhero universe, which was called Catalyst Prime. The owner of the company, David Stewart II, who is still the head of Lion Forge and Lion Forge Animation, was very inspired by Static Shock. Static Shock was a cartoon in the early 2000s based off of a Milestone character named Static, right?
Okay.
Static Shock would go on to be a very seminal cartoon in our culture, and it inspired 2 generations of young Black people for whom that was the first time they felt validated as a hero, right? So he wanted to make his own superhero universe. Because of my experience on Milestone and Batman, he brought me on board to shepherd that. So, okay, so when you're starting to build a universe, you need to create a Bible. The Bible has the characters and the rules. It is the sacred tome, just like the King David Bible or whatever Bible equivalent from any religious doctrine. And it is the document with the core information about characters, their world, and the rules, and the do's and the don'ts. So a Bible had to be created, a universe had to be built. To do that, we needed writers. So I found 7 writers and I put together a writer's room. And we did a retreat at a hotel in Los Angeles for 2 days. And in 2 days, we built that universe based off a very nucleic idea presented by the owners of Lion Forge. We built a universe for 18 months of publication and potentially 5 years of stories.
I'm sorry, in 2 weeks you did this?
In 2 days.
Oh, 2 days.
2 days. It was
24/7.
Yeah, it was the conference room, meals, and sleeping. And a lot of whiteboards and sheets and Sharpie markers.
And brilliant people, obviously.
Oh my
goodness. Do
goodness.
that in 2 days?
My goodness. Well, listen, because of what this was, I wanted to bring together some of the best minds in comic books, because building an entirely new superhero universe and intending to compete with Marvel and DC, that's both an intimidating and an exciting enterprise. So we did that, and then I spent 2 weeks taking all that information. We came up with the notes, shaping it into the Catalyst Prime Universe Bible. After that was done, I had to pick the artists for all of the books. So who does the black and white art? who does the coloring, who does the lettering, right? For 7 titles. There's going to be 7 monthly titles. So that was done. And what happens for each comic book, you have a writer. So a writer will come up with a plot for a plot for an issue. The editor and the writer will talk about it, work it into shape. They get the green light to do the script. There'll be a first draft. Editor will have some revisions. There'll be a second draft. The first issue is always the hardest, but after that, you start to get your groove. Then the artist does black and white pages. Black and white pages are usually 11 by 17. If you're drawing on paper, nowadays, a lot of people use a Wacom tablet or Procreate, so they work on their screen. And then after that, you have a letterer who does all the word balloons and the sound effects. You have a colorist who basically adds that extra dimension to the black and white art. And at every stage, I'm working with every participant for quality control. And then you bring that all together. There's a designer. The designer will usually be a staff member of the company that will create the packaging for the cover and for the interiors. And then you have that file of a comic book that goes off to a printer. And 4 weeks later, you have a comic book.
You make it sound like not a hitch.
No, there are many hitches, just like in any creative enterprise, just like, back in the day when we met and I was a film director and screenwriter, chaos is something that you learn to work with. If you try to fight chaos, you're always going to lose because plan B is always plan A in disguise. Plan A is a fantasy. It's always
that's a great quote. Well,
right?
And then you have, I mean, I'm sure you try not to hire people that are too into their ego, but I know as a creator and as an artist, it's hard to work with other creators and artists sometimes because you're very passionate about what you've done, or, and I imagine there's some head butting on occasion, or who's right, and in artistic subjectivity.
No, you're right. It happens. I am getting better, I would say, at putting together teams of people with the right skills and complementary personalities. One of the things that I like to do is once we have an entire team set up, I like to do an introductory email so that everyone can meet one another. And I encourage them to have conversations that are offline aside from me, because I want them to create their own bonding, right? And then in terms of confidence, it's really weird. We're now at a time where we have a term like imposter syndrome, right? Which back in the day we called doubt, but it's now being called imposter syndrome. And the thing is, I think you have to have enough inner confidence to know that you are capable. How capable you are is to be determined, but you do have a core level of capability, and that has been seasoned by years of experience. And so there is a sense of confidence with the creators, and quite frankly, with myself as an editor. I didn't just fall off the turnip truck. But again, the ego takes the backseat to the story. So we all work together, we have fun, we bring our A game, but it's always about, the story, the characters, the theme.
So are you looking at kind of more the end goal or the, I don't know, looking at the potential of, inspiring people, or is there a certain thing that you guys are looking at the essence of the, the end goal? I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So I would say it like this. The end goal will always surprise you. If you put together the right team of people, you're going to get that proverbial whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. You're going to get something. There are going to be some surprises there. They're going to be pleasant. I have worked on things where when it's collected in a book, that's when it's crystal. Like, wow, that was the goal. And there may have been times along the way when you don't know. Are you going to reach the North Star that you're trying to accomplish? But again, as long as everyone is working towards story, you're going to get to a good destination. Now, sometimes you can be blessed and you can get to a great destination.
Even better, right?
Right. But you'll always get to a good one if you have the right team and if you have the right head.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So when you're working with your teams, how do you help them overcome any doubt or any, creative
Yeah,
lulls? I mean, there's all sorts of stuff, right?
right. So I feel like as creators, since I'm a writer as well, I'm not necessarily, creators aren't necessarily immediately forthcoming with their doubts. They deal with their demons in private, but you develop relationships with people, you have conversations with them, and sometimes they're just, knocked off their game. I've definitely had people say to me how they were gaslit by other people in the industry, made
Mhm.
to feel lesser than. And I've had to say to people, that person was wrong. And I know you may not believe it right now, but I'm telling you that person was wrong. And you have a lot to offer. Right. So sometimes if I can give someone a word of encouragement, that that is part of this relationship that we have. And that's where friendships come from. And that's part of being an editor and being an ally. Right.
Yeah, you're an amazing person as a whole, which is going to be a life changer for people who work with you. I imagine there are many people out there in a field like yours or yeah, just trying to create, who are living under some sort of a just that suppressive, like you said, I mean, being gaslit, that's probably one of the worst things because you
Mm-hmm.
can't even think for yourself anymore.
That's right.
What are some signs you would say if if some, an employee were being treated in that way? It's hard to sometimes see it.
Right. I think where we tend to see it is in work and in pace of work. So if someone slows down, that invites the question of, hey, what's going on? How can I help? Do you need to talk? Right. Sometimes I'm actually just inspired to do what I call drive-bys and just text one of my creators and say, hey, checking in, how are you doing? For no particular reason. It just strikes me something, I read something and it makes me think of them. And I say, hey, I haven't talked with that person in like 2 months. And I'll just do a drive-by. And people have done that for me. Friends have called me out of nowhere and said things that have uplifted me or brightened my day. So it's all cyclical, right? It's all circular. And again, there doesn't necessarily have to be a particular reason other than, it occurs to you. But I would tend to see it in work. And if people have lapses in work development, that would invite me to reach out.
Oh, wow. I wish more people would do that on a regular basis. I call those kind of like a prompting in a way where you get
Mm-hmm.
that feeling, oh, I wonder how that person's doing.
Yep.
And we're being given those prompts for a reason, right? I think. So I mean, as
I have
you've
to
done,
agree.
you're acting on it or texting someone. Every now and then I'll be like, too busy, right? We're busy. So I don't act on those prompts. But it's pretty impressive that you shared that, because I feel like if we as humans did that more often, checking in on each other, there's a reason
Mm-hmm.
for those feelings we get to possibly check in on someone.
100%. I am a firm believer in providence. There are many things outside our understanding, but sometimes, you get the feeling in the back of your head and you just say, hey, do it. Just text that person and say, hey, checking in, how are you doing today? That's it.
That's awesome. And how do you help someone who's hit maybe a wall when it comes to creativity, or, you know, how do you find more inspiration if you're stuck?
It's a good question. I think by virtue of seeing it from a different angle, because when you're a creator, you're inside.
Oh yeah.
You need an outside perspective to see things from a different vantage point. So one of the things that I do is I provide freelance editing and consulting. So when I have clients and I talk with them about their pitches, what we're doing is archaeology, right? We're digging deeper to see what is the potential here that we're not seeing. What is the thematic potential, the dramatic potential, the character potential? What things are we not connecting? So I do that as an editor as well, to a much lesser degree, because, you know, I mean, these creators are on their game. But again, when you get stuck at a point, what I'll say is let's discuss. Or sometimes people get into a comfort zone, and I will recognize that in work, and I will give some input as to, hey, you know, maybe look back at how you approached this in this particular issue. Give them an example so they can see, because sometimes we can just get into that treadmill of creativity where we're just doing it automatically, and there are certain neurons that are not firing, right? And we need people to keep our neurons firing, right? Sometimes they're editors, sometimes they're friends, right? Sometimes they're mentors, but we need that stimulation creatively. And sometimes it's outside work, it's other things that you read and you see. But we need that. We need constant stimulation.
I can only imagine, you know, trying to create a Bible, you call it a universe Bible? Is that what you call
Yes,
it?
yes.
That's powerful.
Yes. Well, I learned it from Milestone. When I was at Milestone in the 90s, they had a 100-page Bible. And I believe they took that model from the television industry, because all the television shows that you watch have Bibles, right?
Okay.
And so that was the first time I saw one. And when I would go to DC Comics and start working on Batman, they had one. So I realized, working at Lion Forge on Catalyst Prime, I had to have one. And I asked them for one. I said, hey, could you give me your Bible? And it was a 4-page document. And I said, no, your Bible. And they were like, this is it. I was like, okay,
Oh.
I see I have more work to do. And that's fine, right? Part of my job to be of service and to show them what they needed. And so it really came from Milestone. Milestone was really, you know, the origin point of a lot of bits of knowledge that I've taken forward in my career.
So taking that free job back in the day
Uh-huh.
was kind of you can go back and say, hey, Joseph, the younger.
Yep. Yep. It was, yeah. There are different forms of value, and almost none of them are monetary, right? So that had a value that I did not understand at that time, which is crystal clear to me now. And when I'm talking to young people, I always encourage them to enter internships. Now, internships tend to be paid. And sometimes if you're not paid enough of you will get together and file a lawsuit, as I believe was done with Condé Nast and Vogue magazine. So we are absolutely in a different time. But back in the day, yeah, they were all free.
Yeah. Different times, I know.
Absolutely.
Well, I ran an opera company for many years in Long. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember that.
I was never paid, but the lessons learned, the value created, all of these things, and also the purpose was greater. You can't, I mean, sure, it would have been nice to have a paycheck, but I just did it out of the love, for the love of opera. And
Yes.
also, I didn't go to school for opera. I didn't study it. I ended up finding it in New York. I'd already gone to school and I was like, I'm not going to spend another 30, 50, whatever, thousand to go get a degree in music or a master's. It's like, I'm going to go study on my own. I found mentors like a Joseph, a Joseph of opera. People who could guide me and lead me. And then, maybe we can create a parallel of sorts, but I think sometimes we can find a different path. And so, finding this opera company to revive was my way of, getting the education I needed without having to pay a different kind of price, So.
And creating that vehicle for other people.
True. Actually, I would agree with that. And it's interesting because that was a time when I didn't know very many females doing what I was trying to do. And I have seen since many women who had joined the opera company as singers, performers, start their own companies. Because you can't do it.
That's right. Yeah, until sometimes something isn't there, you have to put it there, right? Just as what the Milestone founders did, just as you did. It's something is missing. It needs to be in existence. No one else is doing it. I guess I'm going to do it. And that comes with responsibility and peril. But to take action, like that's true courage, right? Like courage is not success because success is not guaranteed. Courage is taking action, which is what you did.
I will say these types of, stretching yourself in such an uncomfortable way. I could, if someone were to say, did you have a degree in blah, blah management or your master's? Did you study at Juilliard? I get that all the time. No.
That's right.
But eventually I was like, no, I didn't. I took a completely different path and here we are. Proof is in the pudding. So
there you go. That's right. There you go.
But we shouldn't be ashamed of our path, right? We shouldn't be ashamed of, Joseph, I know you'll never be ashamed of forging paths for people. You are one of those people who I love it. You're so proud of the work you're doing, and it gives more people courage to stand up for something that hasn't been right for a long time.
Yeah, thank you. I hope so, and I've seen evidence of such. And listen, again, we're all on this journey. There are times when I didn't necessarily do it the right way. And when people let me know about it, I apologized and endeavored to atone and pivot towards a better version of myself and thus a better servant, right? So it's all a process, right? And sometimes, like anyone, I can get really emotionally passionate about things, but that passion can never supersede empathy for the other person, right? So as long as I can balance my passion and my empathy, I'm doing okay. But no, sometimes you get knocked down and you just have to get back up. But again, hey, listen, I learned this from Star Trek. I learned this from Malcolm X. I learned this from my mom. Keep getting back up.
Yeah.
Keep getting back up, right? That's how you win. You win by not staying down.
And that is true. It hurts to fall sometimes. It hurts to
doubt
admit.
About it.
It hurts to admit that I have made a mistake. But it's so beautiful when you can clear away that ego or pride. I mean, really, I feel like that's such an evil it keeps us from truly becoming ourself, our divine self, our reaching our higher purpose, because it's like the more you admit to who you truly are, the more you can truly become,
Mhm,
even
mhm.
ugly. I mean,
Yeah,
I've learned to embrace, I have some demons. It's okay.
yeah, it's part of us, and the sooner you own it, the more liberated you will be, right? It's fighting that, like, no, I don't do that. No, I didn't do that. No, I'm not capable of that. Like, you are capable of that, and you did do that.
Yeah.
Now, what are you gonna do about it? Are you gonna do it again tomorrow? Right? So
Yeah.
sooner you own it, the more liberated you are, that weight that comes off you, right? It's like one of the
Absolutely.
seemingly most difficult and yet easiest things to do is apologize.
I wouldn't, I mean, I would, yeah, I agree completely with that. Apologizing is powerful, because
Yep,
it frees me. I'm not freeing the other person.
that's right.
I'm freeing myself. Letting
Yeah,
go.
yeah, that's where it starts.
We can,
Yeah.
yeah, we can say a few more sorries. We have something funny within our household. And this, I would say this with Diego, Diego. I would say this
Yes, I
with
do.
him. Like, say I'm sorry. Just say I'm sorry. It's like, okay, you won't say it, I'll say it first. Sorry. Sorry. It's just it's a simple word, but it's so powerful.
It's true. Comes with a lot.
It does. It does. Um, are there some things you do when you feel okay? I'm trying to picture, young Joseph when you were
Okay.
younger.
Okay.
And I imagine, so you had mentioned you had anger issues, and I don't know. I think I have maybe an idea where they came from. But it's there's one thing to be angry. There's also that other feeling of discouragement or lack of yeah, just feeling unworthy.
Mm,
Um, are,
mm.
are there are there times in your life that you've had to overcome that in any way? Discouragement or feelings of unworthiness.
Definitely. And that's interesting. So the fallback, one of the things that has helped me in the past is to look at my resume, right? And see the manifestations of what I've done, whether they're in the form of books, whether they're in the form of memories, right? And to understand that my past is not counterfeit, right? And if my past is not counterfeit, then my present isn't counterfeit. So that's one thing. Um, the other thing, emotionally, it's elusive. I will tell you something that I do in the present. Whenever a situation makes me feel powerless, I immediately do something empowering.
For example.
Okay. If I get into a conversation with someone who has authority over me, and that authority is wielded in a way I'm not comfortable with, but cannot engage, then what I do is I take my feelings and I channel them into doing something for my own endeavors, right?
Yep.
So if you're working for an organization and you have a moment of powerlessness, take that energy and transfer it to the organization of you and do something to strengthen it. It's kind of like a compensating thing, right?
Uh-huh.
So,
I like that.
I may say, wow, that really upset me. I'm going to make a new series of ads for my consulting business. That's something that I
Love
do
it.
do, right?
Love it.
And it just came out of frustration, right? And that that transference is basically you proving to yourself that you have knowledge, right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, right? It's like, it's not welcome here, so I will apply it here.
Because I can
And then
appreciate it.
push, right? And push it out into the world where it will be welcome, right? So it's kind of like a
Yeah.
gauge. So that's one thing I do in times of feeling powerlessness. I try to immediately do something empowering.
So no, that's a beautiful and very validating choice. I would agree. I think that's wonderful. So a beautiful thing I'm hearing from you, Joseph, is that you have accrued things outside of your workplace to keep you feeling confident. You have other things that you, maybe we'll call them hobbies even, but you have passions that you have been curating and taking care of and nurturing, in order to have this escape plan, right? It feels kind of like an escape plan where you're like, okay, you're trying to hurt me and destroy what I'm trying to do. Wait, no, you're not. I'm going to go over here and build this beautiful model, this sculpture that I've already had in my mind this whole time anyway. So, oh, look at that creation. And it empowers you again. So
Yeah.
if people don't have that other passion or that other channel, what,
Right.
I mean, what can they find it? What do they do? How do they source it? Where do they go for it? You know?
Right. Yeah. Good question. I feel like everyone does have an interest, and even if they don't know what the interest is, there are things that they like. Okay. So what is something that makes you feel good? Going to see a movie. Okay. Now in this world, it's kind of complicated, but okay, you have your streaming channels, watch something that you feel would make you feel good. Okay, why does that make you feel good? What is it that story is saying to you that makes you feel good? Or if you have a hobby, one of the things that's happening now in our world is there are a number of people who are not going back to work. To be more specific, they're not going back to work for companies that they do not feel compensated them fairly for their level of commitment to a higher ideal, right?
Right.
And what they're doing is they're starting their own businesses, right?
Yep.
So someone can look at their abilities or their superpower, as we will call it for this conversation, and say, how can my superpower service the world in a way that I can structure it as a business, right? Because when you think about organizations that have had a positive impact on the world, usually there's a clarity of purpose, and that purpose is servitude to the world, right?
Yes.
So that's what I would say. I would say there have to be things that you like. There has to be some superpower that you have, which you have yet to tap into, or which you are fully aware of what it is. And how can you take that and build something with it?
Love that. So a superpower. It's funny, before I was earlier today, I was thinking about, oh, I want to ask Joseph, what's his superpower?
Oh man.
I'm really curious.
Okay. Oh, okay. I tell you, okay, I'll take a whack at that because you think it's an easy question for someone working in comics, and it's not. It's a pretty existential question, right? So I'm gonna try it like this. My superpower is archaeology of characters, right?
Oh,
Like if we're talking story, I, through training, like any Jedi or samurai or doctor, or architect, I have developed the skill to be able to see the layers of characters, right? Because, one of the things that we talk about in story, you probably read this in books, it's a typical thing where, there will be the advice of, you always hear this word motivation. What's your character's motivation, right? It's a popular question. What's your character's motivation, right? And a writer named Brian Michael Bendis, actually, I read something by him that inspired me to understand that that's the wrong question. The right question is, what is your character's deepest fear? What is the thing that must never happen to your character? And whatever that thing is, your story must manifest that. Whatever
Wow.
their greatest fear is, they must be confronted with it, because either it will shatter them or they will become elevated. And that's the story of humanity, right? We do not know what our limits are as human beings. I mean, we're living in a time in which we're all learning that our self-conceived limits were misconceived. But if we're still here, if we're still fighting, we're on that journey, right? We're overcoming some primal fears. So archaeology of character is what I would call my superpower.
I love that. As you were talking about the whole story process and creating these stories with your team, there are a few moments I got kind of excited as you're talking, because I'm thinking, ooh, that sounds fun. Ooh, that sounds fun. But so I'm hoping as people are listening to this podcast, especially, some people are feeling lost. They're feeling, without a surety of, what their passion is, what their interests are, what's going to get them motivated to go, motivations, no, to get going, every day, to wake up every day. And it really is empowering to be able to just kind of do some exploratory work for yourself. And I think it's fine to take that time, as you've done through how many 30 years of this work?
Yeah, it's almost 30 years.
Yeah.
On and off of working in this industry, whether it's been at the center, whether it's been tangential, and it's been an interesting ride, and the ride's not over yet, but you could not have told that 23-year-old version of me who walked into the doors of Milestone for that interview what the future was going to hold, right? And this is why we don't have time travel technology, because we should never do that. We should never have the capability to warn ourselves of what's coming. Like, it has to be experienced in linear time.
Yeah. But I know I'm hearing a lot of wonderful nuggets of inspiration and ways for us to, come up with those things that will just give us a little more excitement in our daily lives, no matter what's happening outside of us, outside world, who knows.
And you said something earlier, you talked about protecting the self-protection.
Oh, yeah.
That's also very important, right? Part of finding that interest you have means you have to create a zone of time for yourself that is yours, in which you're not engaging everything that the world is throwing at you, to just say, hey, I'm going to give myself an hour, and I'm going to do, as you said, I'm going to do an exploratory dive into myself.
Yeah. So,
right?
So this is so Sentience, the company I started, so I'm one of those people. I don't know quite my superpower, but I am one of those people who wants to help people explore, because maybe one of my superpowers is kind of seeing beyond. Okay. So if I meet somebody, I wouldn't know necessarily the archaeology of that character, but I can see the beyond.
Yeah.
And I see great potential in people. even if they don't see it. So I work with some very young children right now. I serve and I work with them, and sometimes I'll have parents, oh no, he's too shy. Oh no, he shouldn't do that. No. And I'm like, what? No, this person, absolutely they should. I have such, what should I say? I just have confidence in people. Like, no, don't project your fears, mom and dad.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But and so even with my own kids, I don't want to project fears in them. I want them to just go, do, dream, believe. So sentience is about that. It's like, find ways to discover, explore, don't hold back, because the answers are within us. They're outside too, but in the end, it's collecting and then helping to simulate within yourself. And then there you go. And it's a continued journey, as you had said. So
absolutely. But part of what's really integral in what you're saying is the idea that, as simplistic as this may sound, is that life can be fun. Right? Right? We are,
should be, absolutely.
When we're kids, we want to be adults. We become adults and we realize adulthood is the biggest scam in the universe, because adulthood involves so many complications, right? And we start to forget that life can be fun, and that it's not just the responsibilities, and it's not just the rigmarole, and it's not just existence on a treadmill. Life can be fun, right? And if you don't seize it, you are doing yourself a primal disservice.
Thank you. I always look around and I see very miserable people. And I'm like, why?
Mm-hmm.
Why? As you said, I mean, life should be fun. Sure, we have trials. I know there are hardships, but we can still find joy.
That's right. That's right.
I do. I believe that. I believe there's joy even in our trials. It's like, I know it sounds, oh my gosh, it sounds so cliche or so.
Nah, it's real. Overcoming them gives you something that is enriching, right? Getting to the other side.
What have you had to overcome?
Whoa. I've been gaslit before, right? And I had to overcome that. Many things will happen to me in my future, but not that ever again. But I have had to overcome that. I've had to overcome what I would call automatic anger, quick anger, right? I've had to overcome society's definition of manhood, right? I have recalibrated my definition of what it means to be a man.
Ooh.
Right.
Will you share?
I will share that it involves more vulnerability than people are comfortable with.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The real men I know are more, a lot more sensitive than.
So those are some of the things
right.
that I have had to overcome. And again, there are definitely things ahead, but again, it just feels good for me. It just feels good to wake up in the morning. I wake up in the morning, everything's working, I have people who care about me and love me. I have friends. Life's not that bad. That's a good start, right? Life's not that bad. Well, I'll use that as a foundation any day.
Yeah, you had mentioned the gratitude idea. That's huge, right? Just like a big old G for gratitude every day.
Yes.
But it sounds like this is something, I mean, even when I first met you, I knew you were a real person. I could feel it, right? I love real people, okay?
You saw beyond in me, huh?
I saw beyond.
Because you met a less evolved version of me.
I saw great potential for sure. But you also saw my potential, so thank you.
You're welcome.
It matters, but it sounds to me as well something that is working for you is you the relationships you have, they are meaningful, purposeful, they have substance.
Yes, and part of that is, you had mentioned this before too, is, being with like-minded individuals,
Uh,
right? So here's a trap that people fall into, and it's not necessarily easy to identify. Once you identify it, you have to do something about it. There are people who are toxic. You have to identify that and establish distance, right? And so like-minded people want to do things and help other people, right? And you can sense it to some degree if you have some kind of a meter, right? There's this word that we have in our society, and I think a lot of people misuse it, and the word is attractive. I think a lot of people think about the word attractive and they think beautiful, pretty, handsome, these things. That's not what it is. It's about gravity. It's about, there's something in that human being that makes you want to be in their orbit, right? Those people are the people you need to have in your life. Those people in which you recognize something in them that attracts you to them, some core goodness, something inspiring, something rejuvenating, right? So that's really, I think, core to having good relationships is, finding those people, and then, deciding, okay, hey, that's your village, right? And being willing to help somebody and being willing to accept help, so
yeah.
that's, I would say that's part of what it comes down to, and that's working, for me in my life. And hey, in earlier years when I was the toxic individual, people distanced themselves from me, and I learned from that, right?
Interesting.
So that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
So like-minded people.
Are you did you ever have to experience any periods of loneliness?
Okay, so I'm an only child, right? My father died when I was 10 years old. So what I could argue is that I've been existentially lonely for some time, and that connects to my anger from before, right? I would say now in my life that's not the case. And I think one of the things is that there's a value in solitude, right? So it's okay to be with yourself sometimes.
Yeah.
You don't have to be around people all the time. It's okay to be with yourself. You're with yourself when you're reading. You're with yourself if you just wanna think, right?
Yep.
That's cool.
I love it.
Solitude can be cool. Yeah, oh yeah, my goodness. Especially yourself as a parent, for which time is this thing in pockets that you must exploit to full degree whenever you can. So
I'm laughing. It's so true.
right. So yeah, I don't feel that way anymore. I have felt that way in the past. I definitely felt that way growing up, and when I came across Milestone, that was the beginning of an end of one form of loneliness, because you're talking about, I was born in 1969, so I'm a child of the 70s, I'm a teenager of the 80s. Those were not fun times to be Black and to be a comic book geek. They were not. Okay. You were seen as a pariah. You were seen as strange, as an outcast. Definitely wasn't great for the romantic relationship.
Were you bullied? Were you bullied at all?
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
I was definitely bullied.
I don't like mean people.
Yeah, well, listen, you beat them by not staying down too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
As if we're going to get back to comic book mythologies again, that's one of the reasons why the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Captain America works so well. Captain America doesn't like bullies, and he says that, right? He was asked by someone before he is put into the project to become a super soldier. He was asked, do you want to kill Nazis? And he said, I don't want to kill anybody. I just don't like bullies.
Okay.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there's some core integrity right there, right? So I've been bullied. I'm still here, right? So as far as I'm concerned, I won.
Yes, and thankfully you didn't give up on your comic book reading, or giving.
Look at that, right? Like, we are now in a world in which one of the 4 favorite food groups of culture is superhero mythologies.
Yeah.
Who the hell would have thought that? But here we are, right? And
yeah.
I am fortunate to be equipped to be a servant.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I will go and get some comics. No, if I'm a beginner in comics, how do you find what you like? No, really,
Good question.
What do I do? Help me find the way.
So I guess this starts with what kind of stories you like. So what genre? Is it romance? Is it mystery, horror?
Mystery. I like mystery and suspense.
Okay. So if you like mysteries, okay. So then I think what you do is, the easiest thing, I would say Google the genre you're interested in and put like graphic novels in back of it.
Okay.
Right? Like popular mystery graphic novels, popular suspense graphic novels. And that's one way. If you happen to have a comic book store in your area or your library in your area, graphic novels are a major category in libraries these days, and librarians are very literate on their graphic novel collection. You go to your librarian and say, hey, these are the kinds of things that I like. What would you recommend?
Okay.
Right? You go to a comic book store, maybe there's one near you. Maybe there's one that you know of that can mail books to you. Say, hey, I want to start reading like graphic novels or comic books. This is what I like. What do you suggest? Right? Because it's an exciting question. Comic book store owners love that question. And it's also exciting for you, right? To begin this journey and say, hey, show me something.
Yeah.
Show me something I haven't seen.
Thank you. This is actually, so with all the sense in the world, it's all about people trying to tap into new ideas, new thoughts, new ways to stimulate their senses, right? So I love reading, but how nice is it to mix a little bit of, reading with the visual, right?
Yep.
And tell me what are basically the pros of, reading a graphic novel as opposed to, well, not reading at all, or no.
Whoa.
Okay, I know we won't talk about that one, but
well, listen, to those people who are not big readers, I would really encourage you to read more. It's really, I have to tell you, I honestly believe one of the truest gifts of humanity is the ability to read. So I would really implore people to not deny themselves that. Now, when you talk about the pros of reading comic books or graphic novels, over a prose novel or something like that. So, we're used to seeing words and images combined. It started with children's books. We watch television shows, we watch films. Comic books do it in a way that no other medium does it. It can do things with narrative. It can do things with the language that no other medium
Okay.
can do. How a comic book works. You can actually go backward and forward in time just by turning pages, right? Like all of time is there in the one book.
Awesome.
And art, right?
Yep.
Art is absolutely amazing, right? The artists who have honed their skills to be able to tell these stories. This graphic novel that I wrote, MPLS Sound, which takes place during the 80s in Minneapolis during the era of Prince. The artist, her name is Meredith Laxton, right? And I can tell you that there were days when I was not feeling good, and I would open my inbox and the editor would say, "Hey, I have some new pages."
Ah.
And it would just turn my mind around, because to see my ideas visualized and improved upon and given life in this way, it's amazing. The combination of art and words is amazing. So to me, that's the benefit. The benefit is this language of storytelling is a beautiful and amazing language that can do things that no other narrative form can do.
I love it. So my son started creating a storyboard of sorts of a video game.
Okay.
And I'm going to have to, he's 10 and
Okay.
he's an avid reader, and he reminds me a little of you, because that is his superpower, reading.
Awesome.
And I'm so grateful, because I have
Yes.
tried, and I'll also toot the must read more horn, because I don't think I would be who I am today if I hadn't read. And I wouldn't have the imagination I have. I wouldn't have an ability to dig up ideas, because these books I was reading as a kid, they were my escape too, right? It's my,
Yeah.
I didn't have much to look forward to. So I'd read a book and it was like, I went places, I traveled, I was exploring, I was reading Nancy Drew mysteries. It's like,
That's right.
she took me on many a journey. But I've always known reading is super important, as well as creating a better vocabulary, knowing how to
Yes.
spell. I mean, it's simple.
Yes.
It's a simple
Yes.
thing. Read so you can spell, people.
Yes. It helps. It helps.
It helps. And I've heard, a good reader, if they're speaking with words and a vocabulary that are bigger than them, but it's because they know the words, they just don't know how to say them. They hadn't heard them. Is that true?
Yes.
Like my son will say rigid, and I was like, "Oh, you mean rigid?" It's because he had
Right.
read it. He just didn't know how to say it.
That's right. That's right. But listen, at least he's trying. At least he's,
I love it.
He's not afraid of words.
Yes. Right.
Right. He's
Words.
not afraid of the words. What he needs is guidance.
Yes. Yes. No, I love it. Anyway, but his storyboard, and it feels like this is a really beautiful tool, this idea of creating a Bible. So I am a religious person, but anyway, but
Yes.
these Bibles become, it's like your safekeeping, your ideas, your images, and I think I'll ask him, maybe instead of creating a storyboard, it's like, no, create your lines, your ideas, I don't know how to describe it, but it sounds like a Bible is the way to go.
I would say so, right? So basically, it's like, who are all the characters? What's the world like? And what are some ideas for journeys that you want to take them on? So there's a young man, he lives down the block from me, and his mother and I are friends on Facebook, where she's seen me talk about my career and different things. And so she told her son about me and my interests. So he approached me one day, and then we started geeking out on things like The Expanse and things. And he told me about these characters that he had. And then we just started having conversations about the characters. And I said, okay, how about I give you some exercises, right? So I would give him homework. He would do it in the form of a Google Doc. I would go in there and put notes, and then we would have conversations every Wednesday and we would talk about them, right? And so one of the things that we did a lot were talk about his characters. So he would say something like, you know, this woman became a forceful leader and started this splinter movement. And I would say, okay, why did she do that? Right? And who is going to try to take that away from her? Because anytime someone gets power, especially a woman, there are a line of people who are ready to take that power away. So, right? That's this is what we're talking about, right? Okay, why does the character do what they do? And what challenges will the character face to keep what they have? And what are they going to do to keep what they have? That's drama, right? So these are the questions that I would help him answer, because when you watch a lot of things, you tend to create archetypes based off of characters that you've seen in popular culture, right? But you really have to go deeper so that your character is a character and not just a fake version of X, right?
Yeah. I like how you were bringing up these questions to this young man, because when you start to see the value in your work, so if he's becoming more committed to the character, he can become more true to her as he's creating her, right? Answering these questions about her. Well, of course she's going to do that because this is who she is. And, you know, you become more drawn to that character, and you'll advocate for her more, right?
Exactly. Right. That's right.
That's powerful.
You will advocate for her, and you will learn things about her that you might not necessarily be comfortable with, but that character will be true to themselves. It is true that at a certain point, when you flesh out a character to a certain degree, they will start answering the questions for you, right? Now, going back to your son, right?
Yep.
He's going to build this world, and he's going to start having fun with it. And I think part of that is because the Bible creates structure instead of this random make. Like you can actually, you can actually apply assignments or goals or structure, and that can, really just like get some neurons firing.
I love that. Thank you. I will be sure to share that with him, because he has a very creative and thoughtful mind, and I see him doing well. He also does like drawing a bit. You had shared a quote with me prior to the podcast, but I wanted you to repeat it because it was so fascinating. And I'm wondering if that's what we have to ask ourselves in anything we do. But your friend had you ask yourself a question because you were considering becoming a visual artist.
Right.
What was that question?
The question he asked was, if you were walking down the street and you saw your own work, would you buy it? And he said, if the answer is yes, then you have a future as an artist. If the answer is no, then you don't.
Does that apply to other things? Like if I'm baking a pie and I want to sell pies, but I would never buy my own pie, then I shouldn't become
okay, that's interesting.
Professional baker.
That's interesting. Wait. I would try it like something like this, right? So first off, do you really like making pies? And secondly, do you get better with each pie? Right? So if you like doing this thing and you are constantly improving, that's a good sign that that is something that you feel really good about, maybe passionate about, and maybe that is a way in which you can provide service to the world. I mean, back in the day, I would say in my 40s, right? I was a big Food Network fanatic. Every Saturday and Sunday from like 9 in the morning to like maybe 9 in the evening. My TV would be on Food Network while I was cleaning the house or whatever. And there were so many stories about people who started their businesses because, hey, I've been baking cupcakes for years and I lost my job at the bank and I've been selling my taking my cupcakes to these little fairs in the town. And I just thought to myself, hey, why don't I just start a cupcake business? Right? And that's how it begins, right? So to me, those would be the questions, right? Is it something you really like to do? Do you show improvement as you go on?
Okay. Okay. So could you have become a visual artist?
Good question. I'm going to say no because the passion wasn't there. It was
Okay.
something that I wanted to be, but it wasn't something that I was passionate about.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those kind of course if I want to become a singer, would you buy your own CD, you know, or would I, it's like a lot of people live in a little world where they're like, yeah, I'm amazing. And then, oh, would someone else buy your CD? I don't know. I don't think so, but no, you know.
Yeah. It's kind of like, right, the echo chamber, right? Part of the community that we were talking about building is a community of people who will be honest with you, not necessarily brutally.
Right.
Honesty can be delivered without brutality,
Kindly
but honest.
Okay. I can appreciate that too. Good. No, I've loved our conversation today. I have just a few last questions, but this is a lot. This is a lot to absorb, and
Thank you for having me. This has been great. I'm enjoying myself.
I am too, and I feel like there's going to be a few sequels down the road here.
All right, that's fine. Like any good presentation, right? There can be a 2 and a 3. We'll figure out the subtitles.
Correct. Yes. No, I feel like we can learn a lot from you and the process of creating stories. I mean, our lives are a story. But
yes,
I feel like, yeah, I feel like you're a wonderful mentor in many things, also in character development for our own personal lives, you know. So yeah, I can feel your encouragement. So that's wonderful. I wanted to ask you, it's funny you had mentioned you don't ask what is their motivation, you ask what are their fears. And that is actually a question I was going to ask you is your fear. What is your fear?
Wow.
Has it changed? Has it evolved?
Okay. So I guess if we'll really dig down deep into it, I think this is actually a core human fear, but I think with me, because of the industry I'm in or the road I've chosen, it's a bit more crystallized, right? It's to leave, as in like the final departure, and to not have mattered.
Ooh.
And to not have made, if the world is worse in my departure, if I didn't make it a vestige better, that's my greatest fear, right? Now listen, now that's also directly connected to ego. Yes, right? Human ego. We all want to like make a mark, leave an imprint, something indelible. That would be my greatest fear. Yeah, I would go with that, to have left no impact.
Well,
Or
too
no
late.
meaningful impact.
Too late. You've already accomplished it. Okay, so you can brush that fear aside.
Okay.
You have left already a legacy. So even with this podcast, okay, people are going to hear amazing. No, really.
The vehicle that you created.
Yes.
To share stories.
Yes, and you have had a willing heart to share and a desire to share, and you have found many vehicles. Thanks for coming on my I don't know, vintage Jag. I think that's what we're in right now.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. It was an honor. I remember when you first announced it, and I was like, wow, like just when I think she's done creating things, she created something else. That's pretty great. You know, and then I got the invitation. I was like, oh man, this is okay. Okay, this is for real. Okay, okay.
Now it's starting to make some sense, huh?
More. The origin of it automatically had that. It's
good.
Now experiencing it, there is greater clarity.
Okay, good. Well, I don't want too much clarity, you know, a little
That's
mystery.
True. That's true.
And I also I have a huge passion for travel, and I'm curious, you know, and you had talked about, you know, people trying to find their creativity, and I'm feeling like there have to be places maybe you travel or have traveled that help kind of stimulate some sort of creativity, or are there places you've traveled that kind of make you feel different? Or
yeah, no, that's interesting. You know, I've traveled a little bit. You know, I have family in the Bahamas. I have family in Jamaica, both of those wonderful places. I went to New Zealand about 4 years ago because my wife has family there, and I was there for 2 weeks. And I had not taken I don't know if I had ever in my life taken a 2 week vacation. I've taken a lot of 1 week vacations, but not 2 weeks. And the further away you go, the longer you need to be there, right?
I'm glad you know that.
That's just a fact.
Good.
And so I was there for 2 weeks, and that definitely had an impact on me, and realizing that, first off, you owe it to yourself to be away from your life for an extended period of time. And it just reminds you that if you have a solid foundation here, it's not all going to fall apart, right? You know, we've been talking about gaslighting and things like that. You know, one of the things that has happened in our culture is how corporate America has gaslit us into believing we should not take vacations. We should feel guilty about taking time away, because the more you're away, the more work will be there when you get back, and the more disasters will occur and explode while you're away. And that is fundamentally false.
Yeah, definitely gaslighting going on.
That is fundamentally false. The best employees get their vacation time because they need their minds cleared and refreshed to engage new challenges.
Amen. Those retreats you were talking about, I'm a fan of retreats, really.
Yep.
Stepping away, finding your creativity in a new environment, stepping outside of your comfort zone it's sometimes hard for people, but it is so valuable, so good for you.
That's right.
That's my opinion.
Leave the city, remove social media applications from your phone for a week.
Yeah.
Just break away.
I love it. Thank you. No, there are all these wonderful little exercises that each of us can do to gain more. How about we go back to the idea of joy, right? Joy in our lives.
Yeah.
It's available.
It's there. It can be seized.
Yeah. Amen. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Well, Joseph, I'm excited to see I can't fully see your future, but I know it's exciting. And
thank you. I hope so. I hope I've got a good stretch left, because, you know, like, I'm in my early 50s now, and, you know, I feel like there's a lot more exciting things to do, right? And everything that I've lived through has been preparatory for what's ahead.
Yes. No, and thank you for paving a way for many to follow and to be guided by your brilliant mind and your very kind soul. You are a
Thank you. Thank
good,
you very
good
much.
heart. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been great talking with you and just really, exchanging ideas because that's what it's all about, right? It's just it's great for us to connect and exchange ideas.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. All right, and until next time, today we had Joseph Illidge. Please tell us, before we leave, where they find you.
Okay, the people can find me at josephillidge.com. So that's JOSEPHILLIDGE.com. That's my website. On Facebook, I'm Joe Illidge. Twitter, I'm Joseph P. Illidge. Instagram, I'm Illmaster1. LinkedIn, I'm Joseph Philip Illidge. And I'm around, I'm available. There aren't a lot of barriers. We talk about anything here. Sometimes I have to take a break, like we spoke about, because work must be done. But in general, I'm around.
Thank you for being around.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you, Joseph.
All right, nice. Good work. All right.